So over the course of my years of preaching, I oftentimes will remember some of my teachers. You know, the older that I get, the more do I really appreciate what my teachers taught me: elementary school, high school, college, graduate school, seminary. You know, for sure, absolutely so. I treasure what they did, and I came to even appreciate them even more for the 13 years that I worked in secondary education. And as I was praying over the scripture passages for today, but especially the gospel, I remembered one of my grade school teachers, and I can't exactly remember who it was, but this is what she taught my classmates and I. Always pray as if everything depends upon God, and always work as if everything depends upon you. And I have to say that I guess over the course of experience and because of my personality, I've come to disagree with that adage. You know, first of all, I'm a type A personality. I'm an ISFJ on the Myers-Briggs. You know, when I get into a task, I really get into it and obsess over it to bring it to successful completion. And that might be a dangerous response to what we learned as the adage: always pray as if everything depends upon God, and to always work as if everything depends upon you. And I would like to suggest that both in light of today's gospel and then in terms of my own experience, the adage should probably say this: always work as if everything depends upon God, and always pray as if everything depends upon you. Because when we start to think about it and we start to take a look at the tasks that we need to get done, we better not be relying solely on ourselves. Especially in the work of the church, a person would have to be an absolute fool leading ministry to put Jesus at a distance or to not trust in his presence. And wasn't that the problem in today's gospel? You know, here we have the storm coming up, and no one of us could fault the apostles for being frightened, you know, especially for those of us who are afraid of water. You know, in the midst of a storm, you'd be a fool not to be concerned when a storm would come up. But the problem in that particular story is the one exactly that caused Jesus to ask the question, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? You know, after those times in which Jesus was building a relationship with the apostles, they were coming to know each other and they were coming to know Jesus as well. And in the midst of it all, they're frightened. Somehow they felt they had to try to calm the storm themselves and knew they couldn't. And you know, one of the things that the apostles obviously didn't think about was not only the question that Jesus raised: why are you afraid? Why don't you trust me? What seems to be the difficulty here? The apostles should have thought about the fact that Jesus was also trusting in them. He wasn't the fisherman. He wasn't the one that was steering the boat. He got into the boat with them as a sign of his trust in them as well. And so I think it's important for us to take a look at that in our own lives. You know, that when we take a look at whatever it is that we do in the course of a day, you know, whether it's by way of our employment, or it's in our relationships with others, or building in our own family, or helping to build the church as we're on mission to be a church that's very much alive, it is really important that we place our trust in Jesus, because he promises to be with us always. But we better not forget that Jesus places his trust in us. And how do we know that? Because every single one of us has a vocation. We're either married or single, and consecrated life or ordained. That is a sign that Jesus trusts in us. The vocation is the way in which he calls us, like he called the early apostles, to help spread his kingdom. And any one of those four vocations. And you know, if we need to reflect on something, I'd suggest that you go back and take a look at the story about those first martyrs of Rome. We know that Rome was the center of the world. We know that Christianity really didn't come to Rome until about 20 years after the death of Jesus. And within 10 years after their arrival, the despotic emperor Nero in 64 AD set fire to the city of Rome. And he did so because he wanted a bigger palace. And it's interesting to note that he was only 27 years old when he did that. And in the end, because he had such a hatred for Jesus, because he was jealous of Jesus and the increasing number of Christians, he began to persecute them and began to blame them for the city being burned. In the midst of it all, starting with Peter and Paul and the rest of them, they trusted in Jesus. And I'm going to bet that they trusted in Jesus because they knew that he trusted in them. And so with all due respect to my former teacher, let's reflect on that revised adage. Always work as if everything depends on God. And always pray as if everything depends upon you. Because in the end, it doesn't. It all relies on Jesus.